What's going on, everyone? Welcome to a Wednesday edition of Back Your Play with Q. As always, I'm your host, Rich Quinones. Check out the YouTube channel. Appreciate all the support, the engagement at Rich Q and Q. You find us everywhere: YouTube, Rumble, 1029 The Game, Leon Media. We're all over the place, and that's we're happy to have our good friend and our next guest, of course, Lloyd Vance. You can hear him. Lloyd Vance is Insider Football 1029 The Game, which is based out of Tampa, Florida, and of course part of the Broad Street South Network. He's kind enough to join us as we kind of put a bow on week 3 already in the NFL. And big man, I feel like we're starting to separate the boys from the men, and we're only 3 weeks in.
Yeah, Q, there's still some separation to come, but there seems to be a glut of 25 teams that are either 2-1 or 1-2. So we still have a lot of parity. But what I've liked is some of the games are competitive, but we are starting to see in some of these blowouts, some of these teams are dominant. And I'm sure we're going to get to some of those blowouts and some of those teams, but it's just an interesting time of the year. I always caution everybody to kind of not to get caught up though in the records and my teams, right, in the basement, because last year Jaguars 2-6, everybody counted them out, and then they win their division, and then they made some noise in the playoffs. So there's a lot of football to be played, but obviously, some of these early games may paint some forward pictures.
Yeah, listen, Buffalo woke up. We know what the Eagles are doing. Miami looks like a juggernaut. The 49ers look like a juggernaut. We had that weekend where some of these games were going to be absolute blowouts. I kind of want to go to the ugly first, because I'm wondering now with the Jets and Robert Saleh, who keeps coming out and doubling down on Zach Wilson. The kid cannot flat out play. You've got, Joe Namath chiming in. You have everyone in New York, the media, the talking heads going nuts. You have his teammates seeing perhaps a divide. Aaron Rodgers makes a comment on McAfee the other day. He doesn't like what he sees on the sideline. Aaron Rodgers, no disrespect, shut up. You've had a cup of coffee with the Jets. I mean, honestly, so you hold no water. I'm sorry, not in that regard. But they go out, they sign Simeon, and you just got to wonder, when it's almost insanity. I think it's malpractice by Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas to keep trotting this kid. I mean, out there, they're not going to win many games with Zach Wilson.
Well, Q, and it could be their detriment that they believe in this kid. And you don't want to see anybody fired, but, obviously Woody Johnson and Chris Johnson, the owners of this team, they have their eye on this situation. And Salah, is he the guy? It's his 3rd season. And that already is like a big barometer mark, especially for a team that has not played in the playoffs since 2013. It's been a very long time. And it does not look like it's getting any better. And as you said, the locker room is kind of turning on each other. You have Aaron Rodgers, as you said, he's from the rehab table. He's saying, "Hey guys, quit it. We're all friends here now. You know what? You're not in the locker room. You're not in the huddle anymore. Sorry, buddy. I know you were the talk of the team during Hard Knocks, but these young guys aren't going to listen to you if you're not there day in and day out." And everybody, no, everyone doesn't want to say we made a mistake with Zach Wilson. It's almost like we talked about this before about these number 1 picks, and some GMs just will not say, you know what, all right, I've made a mistake. This guy stinks. Let's move on from him. Zach Wilson, I almost gave my lackey again, Q. 18 of 36 for 50%, 157 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions, but he was sacked 3 times. All those sacks were situations where he's holding the football. And then you see him and Garrett Wilson on the sidelines. This is going to be combustible. So
that's exactly it.
Bad situation, And the big thing is trying Trevor Simeon to help right the ship. This guy's terrible. He no disrespect to him, but he's
but
not.
why so loyal to this kid? I mean, just admit it's not working out. I mean, it's okay. Like you're almost sitting up there lying to the fan base. You're lying to your players. You're lying to the organization. Why the double down? Is it, if I'm going to go down, I'm going to die with my boots on? I mean, there's no honor in dying like this if you're a head coach, because the kid can't play. If he was playing well and he came back from an injury and you want to put him out there and he's earned that equity and he's built up the equity and the trust, that's one thing. He stinks. He sucks. He's not an NFL quarterback. And it's unfortunate because he seems like a nice kid, but he can't play. and you've got a ready-made defense. So my problem isn't even about him anymore. It's the head coach consistently and constantly doubling down and being so defiant.
Yeah, and he's kind of, Salah's always got that smile and he's very jovial. Well, guess what, buddy? You're going to laugh your way out of this league,
Yeah.
and it's about results, they're 1-2 team, and they have a chance to still be in the fight of this season. And then we talk about this game in particular. Belichick once again confused a Jets quarterback.
Yep.
15 straight wins by the Jets. I mean, the Patriots over the Jets, and it was on display how bad this team is, and they're kind of going in opposite directions. The Jets were 2-14 on third down, so that just shows you how inefficient, and they just couldn't get anything done. The Patriots on the other side of this, they're built around their defense. Matthew Judon is for real. He's a game wrecker. He had 4 tackles, 2 sacks, and he had that huge safety in this game. So, they're both 1-2. New England, we'll see. They're at Dallas. That's a big game for them. And then the Jets, it doesn't get any easier. They have a home game against Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs.
Hammered. They're going to get hammered. I mean, they'll cover. This was the weekend where even if you didn't have to tease them down, you got your 2, 3, 4 blowouts. And let's not discount the Texans around Jacksonville. You mentioned Kansas City all over the Bears, 41-10. I mean, talk about a joke of a franchise. You've got Chicago, and then, hey, hold my beer, I'll do you one better. The Dolphins put up 70 against Denver. I mean, I kept refreshing it. It was almost as if it was a video game. I misread it, and I'm wondering, a game like that where I watched a game, they re-aired it last night. The Dolphins, if you go back and you look at their scoring drives, they scored the first 3 plays, boom.
Quick strike.
Quick strike, 9 plays, 7 plays. I mean, it's unbelievable to watch. I think they're a juggernaut. We know about Tua, we know about the offense, we know about the defense, but I want to go flip side to Denver. They're 0-3. You and I have been talking about this for a while now. Sean Payton, turns around last year and he says, hey, Teddy Bridgewater is going to supplant Tua in Miami. And then Tua comes out and they friggin' wax him. You got Mike McDaniel, who was a friggin' ball boy for Denver, talking about not running it up. I mean, you could have stopped after 50. Hell, kick the field goal and break the record. Who cares at this point? But how about Denver? I mean, the road does not get any easier for Denver. And it's a horrible game this weekend. So they might finally get a win. I mean, if they can't get a win against Chicago and or the Jets, they might go over because they've got Kansas City, Green Bay, Kansas City, Buffalo, Minnesota, Cleveland, Houston. I mean, where the hell are they going to get a win here?
Yeah, and it's funny, Q. I went back and I just read the quote from Sean Payton in terms of how he smacked around Nathaniel Hackett. We're doing the opposite this year, because everything was so bad, and this is a big trade for Denver. They gave the Saints a first-round pick
Yep.
and a second-round pick for Payton. They got a third in return, and he's just not getting it done. In the terms of stop me, if you're mad, stop this offense, and they just couldn't. Their defense is terrible. If you feel bad for Surtain the second and the rest of some of those guys on that Denver defense, but they're just not getting it done. And then Miami just pushed them all over around the yard, Q. And Tua is in that MVP conversation.
Yeah.
He's first in wins, passer rating, touchdown attempts, yards completion, everything. And this team could score 700 points in a season. That would just shatter the record of the past 600 and some by the Denver Broncos when they had Peyton Manning in 2013. So, I do think that McDaniel did want to rub it in a little bit, and he had fun watching this, but it's going to be interesting to see, can this Miami team keep it going? Big game this weekend at Buffalo.
Yeah, we'll document the games and highlight them on Friday edition of BYP when we do a football Friday. Colts picked up a nice win, field goal kicker, special teams. Seattle, I thought Arizona, I guess they're not tanking, right? And good for Dobbs to Joshua Dobbs to get a win. And I don't know if that's a come back down to earth loss for the Dallas Cowboys because we are praising them, and I don't know how much you want to incorporate the loss of Diggs, but that was a game where you got the Dak Prescott horrible pick. I saw you tweeted it out. I mean, he's good for one of those now in the red zone in a critical moment. They ran the ball very well. I think they had a buck 45, 122 from Pollard, but Dak's throwing it 40 something odd times in a somewhat close game, but they could not, as crazy as it sounds, they could not stop Arizona's ground game. I mean, the Cardinals racked up 200 plus yards.
222 yards rushing, 7.4 per carry. So they were physical and just dominating in front. And when we talk about the Cowboys, Q, I always say paper champion. They look on paper, but if this was a game where they thought they were just going to roll the ball out and they were going to be the Cowboys,
Yep.
and everybody's talking about Arizona tanking and Gannon, to his credit, and Dobbs, they said not so fast. They were ready for this game, and they were impressive because particularly James Conner, 14 rushes for 98 yards, one touchdown, establishing that ground attack. And then also Dallas, they were sloppy.
Yes, they
13
were.
penalties in this game. They just kept shooting themselves in the foot over and over again. 10 in the first half. You thought when they went in the locker room down 21-10 that they would kind of right the ship, but as we said, McCarthy is just not that X's and O's coach that they thought they were getting, and you're starting to see, okay, especially away from home, which Dallas team are we going to get? So this week, got New England, then they're at San Francisco, huge game for them. At the Chargers, then they have their bye. So, they got to clean this up. Dak, 25 of 40, 249 yards, but he had that huge interception. He's playing from behind, and you could see CD Lamb was getting frustrated out there. He was not getting the football. He seemed to target Michael Gallup a lot more, and Dallas has got a lot of work to do. Need to look in the mirror and understand every week is a fight, because obviously everybody gets up for the Cowboys because they know they're going to be a national TV and all the fans and all the drama around them. So, good win for Arizona. Showed they are still in the fight. And yeah, I don't think any team is going to join the 2008 Lions in 0-16 infamy not winning a game.
Yeah, well, some teams are in trouble. One of those other teams is Minnesota. I mean, I think Cousins has played relatively well. There's some thought that now Jefferson wants out of Minnesota. The rub is everyone's saying trade Cousins. If you're the Jets, make a move for Cousins. He won't nix the no trade clause. But I don't hear people talking about that division, because think about it. Green Bay got a really nice win with that young quarterback, but that division's not setting the world on fire. So even if Minnesota's 2-3, 3-3, 3-4 come the trade deadline, depending upon what the Lions and Green Bay's doing, because we know Chicago is going to be bad, they might want to keep Cousins and see if they can at least win a division and get in the playoffs and make some noise. So it's almost like a damned if you do, damned if you don't. And if you're Minnesota, you got listen, you got to start winning some football games here.
Yeah, and Q, I talked to a lot of personnel guys around the league, and they all say the same thing. We're not going to trade a quality person, especially in season, because there's just such a long season with injuries, they're definitely not out of the race. And I've talked, over the years about maybe they should move back to trade deadline. It is what it is. It's going to be around November 1st, and you're right. Minnesota could still be in this thing. They have a winnable game at Carolina this week. Tough one with KC at Chicago, which they should win that one. San Francisco, that's gonna be a tough one. Green Bay, a team I'm sure we'll get to in a minute. They can beat them, and then at Atlanta. So there are some winnable games, and they can get back in a race. Obviously, at 0-3, we haven't seen a playoff team since 2018 with the Texans, but it's not a big chance, but they still have a chance. And Kirk Cousins in the last year of his contract, he's going to continue to try to ball out. And then Jefferson, look, he had 13 targets. He got 7 catches for 149 yards, 1 touchdown. He has 458 through 3 games, the most in NFL history. So, a lot going on for him in terms of positive things in the right direction with his numbers. Minnesota, though, has to win these one-score games. Last year, 11-0 in those one-score games. This year, 0-3.
There
And
you
they're
go.
another one. They find a way to snatch defeat away from the jaws of victory. Cousins, he had a bad pick in this one as well, and you feel for these guys, but it's a situation where it was a good win for the Chargers. You look on the other side of that, they're
Well, in
another team
spite of
that
the
just could
coaching,
not.
in
Oh, what was he doing going for that? Not punting there and
it's
keeping
not
his
the,
own end.
yeah, but you know what? The way the game is now with the analytics, it's not the most egregious call. It's just the Chargers over the years have found a way to not uh, um, capitalize on those
Yeah,
calls. Like they figure out a way where they call the play and they just can't capitalize on the play, and that's, and I know they're calling for this guy's job already. It,
he's another coach that's fighting for him and Eberflus with the Bears. They're both fighting for their coaching existence. And Staley, that defense, they finally kind of stepped up. They've had a lot of injuries. Joey Bosa's always hurt on that
yeah,
defense, and Derwin James has that big contract. He has not played up to potential, and it was a tough situation. And I just didn't like the play call, to be honest with you, deep in their own end on that fourth down. Yeah, you would like to see them maybe throw it out to Keenan Allen, who's just playing all world. I mean, he was just tremendous in this game. 18 catches for 215 yards. He threw a touchdown, which kind of opened things up a little bit for the Chargers, and he's a guy they're going to have to lean on. So they play
no
the Raiders
Williams,
this week.
no Williams.
Yeah, And Williams gets the ACL in his knee, and they're going to have to bounce back from it. Maybe Parker gets some more looks. I know they have Johnson, that young kid that they drafted. They're going to try to lean on him. Maybe they'll get Eckler back. They have a nice offensive line. They play the Raiders this week, and then they have their bye. So maybe that'll help them get healthy, and maybe it's still Staley can be that coach to kind of turn things around. I always talk about this time of season, you're still in a race. That 2007 Giants team
Oh,
that
and
you and
two.
I always talked about. They were 1-2. They started 0-2, and then they were 1-2, and then they
Yep.
they had their big run, and then they won the Super Bowl. So it
Yeah.
can happen. I'm not saying the Chargers can do it, but they have a lot of talent on this team. I did pick them to make the playoffs, and we'll see how they do.
Yeah, listen, I mean, Williams is the loss. They can't execute some of these plays, even though by the analytics, it could be the right call. You mentioned Green Bay, not too much time on them, but I think a gut check win for a young quarterback. Listen, everyone was just sticking this kind of under a microscope, malign this, malign that. What are they going to do without Aaron Rodgers? They started the season with 2 games on the road. They come back from a huge deficit. So I give them a substantial amount of credit. But then you look at the Saints, who choked up a big lead, and they potentially are going to have to deal with a banged up Derek Carr.
Carr has that shoulder injury, and that was like, oh, he's out, and then here comes Jameis, and Jameis is doing Jameis things. They're trying to run the clock out, and he goes out of bounds, and you know he did have that drive to get him in field goal
Horrible.
position, and their kicker ended up missing it, but it was a quality win for the Packers. This Packers team is really starting to grow on people. You have defensively, Rashawn Gary had 3 or 4 of their pressures and their sacks, and they had a 20% pressure rate, so their defense is getting heat on quarterbacks, and you know, Carr was not comfortable back there. And then I talked about Jameis as well. Maybe Packers will be able to get Aaron Jones back from that hamstring injury. That's going to be interesting to see. But Jordan Love, 22 of 44, 259 yards. He did have one interception, but he had that one touchdown late and the big 2-point conversion, and it was a huge win for them at home. And he also ran the ball for 39 yards in the touchdown. So he's showing some of that explosiveness. They are going to need to get Christian Watson back at some point because he has a hamstring injury, has not played yet. Big game against Detroit this week, and we'll see if they're able to keep the momentum at home in Lambeau. And then Tampa's got to bounce back, and James is probably going to play his old team. Saints when they play Tampa. So that's going to be an interesting game too this week.
Yeah, so Green Bay 2-1. Love was only sacked one time. The offensive line did a real nice job, as you mentioned, close to 260 plus yards in the air, and also had another 39 on the ground. Wednesday edition of BYPQ here. Rich Quinones, Lloyd Vance, our NFL insider, and of course, host of Lloyd Vance's Insider Football on 1029 The Game, and of course, part of the Broad Street South Network. Catch them every Monday at 7 o'clock Eastern time with the gang. You mentioned Tampa just had a game against Philadelphia Eagles, and look, Mayfield looks like he was just straining every time he's trying to throw the football. I mean, it was an ugly game early on. I know Hurts wasn't 100%, but in spite of that, you had the issue with Brown. So what do? They get him his touches, right? They get him his receptions. He has a big game. They put up 500 yards of offense. I mean, Swift looks like he's kind of emerging. Maybe they were doing a little possum with Gainwell, thinking that he was going to be the number one back. I mean, Swift, obviously, he separated himself. He ran very hard, between the tackles. Defense did what they needed to do, and the Eagles are sitting at 3-0.
Yeah, and the big thing when I crunched this game, Q, was the Eagles only punted once and they only had 3 penalties. So,
Hmm.
they for their so start, they were kind of dominant in this one, and it all started with that running game. They had 201 total rushing yards, and I know it may not be the identity at Sirianni and all these guys that want them to throw the football all over the place, want them to have, but this running game is allowing them to establish play action and not put too much pressure on Hurts. So Hurts had those 2 interceptions, kind of forced the ball in a couple situations, but he was only sacked once, and he's still running the ball, I think, a little too much, but 10 rushes for 28 yards and 1 touchdown. They've executed that tush push better than any team out there. When you look at their third down percentage, 10 of 16 on third downs and almost 39 minutes of possession in the game for the Eagles. So, good quality win for them. Got some things to clean up. And then defensively, I think that defensive line may be one of the best in the league. Jalen
No
Carter
doubt.
is just playing at a dominant level. You see this guy, total steal in the draft. He's able to hit the gap. And then Jordan Davis has lost weight and he seems energized playing next to Carter as well as Fletcher Cox, at this stage in his career, and Brandon Graham, his older guys. So this team, the Eagles look good, and can't have a left down though against Washington. This is a big game for them. Remember, Washington ended their unbeaten season last year in Week 10, so this is a big battle for them coming up. I'm sure we'll preview Friday, but right now the Eagles take the win. And you talk about Swift, 130 yards rushing, and they're just blasting holes through everybody, that offensive line. They're looking good. As long as that offensive line's healthy, the Eagles are going to be a team that's going to be there at the end.
Yeah, I mean that tush push, as you mentioned, it's almost like the sky hook, right? It's unstoppable. It might be the most unstoppable weapon in all of sports. All right, and then lastly, Cincinnati. It was ugly, man. I mean, I needed my Cincinnati B man. I needed the Bengals to pick up a friggin' win. They got it. They gutted one out. I still don't know what is wrong with this offense. I mean, obviously, if the quarterback's not 100%, he's compromised. I understand that, but they just look so out of sync. And listen, you get Cleveland with their issues. I mean, we've talked about how bad Deshaun Watson stinks. Baltimore loses. Pittsburgh, the more I think about it, I'm starting to kind of flip on Kenny Pickett. I mean, it's just, the Raiders basically kept them in that game or they kept the Raiders in that game and eventually won. But Cincinnati, it should be them and the Ravens going forward. But what do you attribute these offensive woes to if you're a Cincinnati Bengals fan?
Yeah, I just think Joe Burrow's just never been healthy with that calf, and he's fighting his way through it. 26 of 49, 259 yards. He did have an interception, no touchdown passes, and also you have Higgins that's having a tough season. He had a lot of drops in this game. They really leaned on Jamar Chase. He had 15 targets, 12 catches, and 141 yards. And at points, he was just dominant in this game. So, that offense, I think it's just they didn't have enough time in training camp together, and it's what we always talk about. Not playing these guys in the preseason, that just hurts. And they're just trying to clean things up. Big game at Tennessee this week, then at Arizona. I think they'll be in the mix, and then they have Seattle, and then they have their bye in Week 7. So they're just trying to get to that bye, and then Taylor will kind of reevaluate from there. And I think Burrow showed you his moxie in this game. It was a good quality win, but the Rams are a scrappy team too, so it was a good watch.
All right. I have a feeling I know who the game ball went to, but as always, we always enjoy the lackey in the game ball. So was it a collaborative effort or was it one singular person with this week's game ball?
Well, the game ball, we talked about that sloppy field in Baltimore, and
Oh,
Matt Gay was. I know I did. My one buddy Brian always teased me. He's like, "You don't like kickers, Lloyd," and you know what? when I watch a
Okay.
game like the Saints and the guy blows the kick at the end, that's why I don't like kickers. But in the Irsay Bowl, this was a game Matt Gay stepped forward for the Colts and went back to Baltimore, got the big kick. He was 5 for 5, and he made 4 over 50 yards, including the
Wow.
game winner. So that's an NFL record. So I gave it to Matt Gay. Great effort for them, a good quality win in overtime for them. My lackey Q, I'm sure our buddy Lake Lewis would shake his head, but I got to give it to the Commanders quarterback, Sam Howell. He was just terrible in that loss at
I think I
home,
jinxed that, but go ahead.
37-3 home loss. He threw for 170 yards, but he had 4 interceptions, including a pick six by defensive lineman AJ Epinesa, sacked 9 times in this game, and Washington was 1 of 9 on third down. So that just shows you the ineptness of that team this week. He's going to need a bounce back because the Eagles are going to be angry waiting for him. But he's my lackey for this week.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because last week I was praising him with Brandon Bell, former standout NFL linebacker and standout college football with the Nittany Lions. And I said, man, this kid, the Bieniemy effect. Here we go. Boom. Here we go. All right, Sam Howell, keeping him upright, slinging it. Boom, boom, boom. I turn around. He texts me during the game. He's like, yo, man, what's going on? I said, I might have kiboshed. I mean, it's on me. I don't know what
Jinxed
to
with the
say.
mush on him.
Yeah, listen, you probably could have went a couple different lackeys, man. You could have went Denver, you could have went
Yeah.
Hal. Um, yeah, I'm telling you though, we're getting to the point right now where you start to get in that quarter of the season, right? Quarter of the season plus weather starts changing a little bit, a little hot toddy weather. You're starting to get these divisional matchups early on. This is definitely separate the boys from the men. So all right, Friday, we got to go through the gamut. We got to do the picks. We got to do the lines, the trends. We'll break down the games as we always do. Real quick, before I let you get out of here, did you have any problem with Oregon running it up against Colorado? Because I knew going into that game, that coach reminded me of the scene from Remember the Titans when he said, Herman, leave no doubt, run it up. Like I just felt that they wanted to just shut Colorado up and just, fake punt, fourth down, fourth and goal. I mean, did you have any issue with that?
Now, and it's much like Miami and Denver, it stop us if you want us to stop joking around and all that stuff. Obviously in college football, they want to stick it to Dion. They want to make sure, okay, Dion, you think you're the new biggest thing, you're not ready for the big time. And that's what Oregon wanted to do there. And then they did run it up and they kind of, they had their videos and the bounce back, snap back as the kids call to talk about. But I think Colorado, look, they're going to take their lumps probably this week against USC, but I think they're going to keep going. You got to remember, 1-win team, and now they've already won 3, the biggest story in sports at one point, and everybody's watching them, and we'll see how they go. But sometimes when you see a team getting blown out like that, like Denver, you're like, ooh, this is embarrassing, and you just wonder how when that team goes in the locker room, will they turn on each other and that type of situation.
It was not a very good weekend if you were in Colorado. It was probably a good weekend if you're smoking and joking and enjoying some munchies. You didn't have to deal with it, right? You're almost numb to the fact, what was it, 45 points and 70 points? So you had about 120 dropped on you. So, hey, nothing a couple of gummies can't take care of. So he is my guy, Lloyd Vance, at Lloyd Vance. And of course, NFL writer, researcher, historian. And also Lloyd Vance's Insider Football on Broad Street, South Pod, and of course, 1029 The Game, Pro Football WA Award winner, and part of the Black College Football Hall of Fame Selection Committee, and always kind enough to join us on BYP Friday. We'll break down the games already in week 4. Looking forward to doing it, my friend.
All right, thanks for having me on, Q.